welcome to this brand new series on the Liberian Literary Hour. My name is Dennis Jar, and we are broadcasting from Atlanta, Georgia. We are debuting a brand new show on Focus on Liberia tonight. That's the Literary Hour, where we're going to be talking about nothing else but literature. And this new show, the co-host will be someone whose passion, whose whole entire life is about literature. My co-host for this show will be Jackie Sayegh. Jackie, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Thank you, Dennis. I'm really glad to be here and to co-host this show with you. Yeah, thank you.
We want to welcome all our viewers from across the globe. This is the Literary Hour that we are debuting today. Is going to be, depending on how we look at it, weekly, bi-weekly. You decide how you want this to go. But tonight is the first edition of the Literary Hour with Jackie and Dennis. Our discussion will focus primarily on the development of the Liberian literary tradition. And what we're going to be doing is to discuss some Liberian writers as time goes by. We will give you an overview of African literature, the importance of literature to a nation and nation building, and we chart Liberia's literary development and the national events that influence the various phases of this canon. Jackie, I'm very glad, I'm excited about this series. This has been long in the making because literature is so important and we're going to delve into that. But I thought focus on Liberia, our goal is to educate, elevate, and promote all things Liberia. Thought that if we don't have literary hour on focus on Liberia, then what are we doing? So I'm so excited and I hope that you are also.
Yep.
So let's get started. Jackie, I want your opening statement on this brand new show that we are starting. It's new. I don't see it anywhere else across the Liberian literary landscape or social media platform in the diaspora. And this is something new. What's your thought? What's your feeling?
Definitely. I think that it's long overdue. I think that Liberian literary tradition and the development of Liberian literature, as we see now from many of the new books that have come out, I think is something that is necessary in our country, is necessary for nation building. And I think as a people, we should take pride in a breed of writers that's coming up. But it's very important for us to know about the literary tradition and the literary history of Liberia as we go forward.
I want us to start also by saying because you bring Jackie, by the way, is a program manager at the African. No, I don't want to miss that. The Institute for African Development. She's also the Secretary General for the Liberian Studies Association here in the diaspora. Jackie, a little bit more about your literature background. This is something that you have passion for. So let's talk a little bit about your involvement with literature. Why you like this literature business so much?
Thank you, Dennis. First of all, I would like to say thank you to my professors at the University of Liberia, Professor Patricia Jabe Wesley, Professor K. Moses Nangwe, Professor Althea Romeo Mark, and all the others who helps me along the way in the appreciation of literature. I would also say that my love for reading and literature started very early. My father owned and ran the National Bookstore in Liberia for many years. And as a child, I would work in the store. And when I say work, I mean it loosely. I would just sit there and read. And reading became a passion. You know, my father would say, I'm selling the books. And I would say, I'm reading the books. So it just developed from there. Actually, when I went to the University of Liberia, my intent was to study history. But I just got so interested in the literature of the country that I decided that, no, I'm going to major in literature and minor in history, which I did, which I think was really a good fit because I was able later on to look at the historical events and see it reflected in the literary work that was coming out of Liberia. And yeah, so I think it was a good fit.
Right. And Jackie, like you, I developed a early in life. I was born in a village. You know, I always tell people I was born, all the way beyond God's back. But what happened is, so we are in the village, a little town, telling stories. Okay, whenever we saw anyone passing nearby who spent a night with us, we asked them, tell us stories. So very early in life, I developed this yearning for stories. Tell me story, and we'll go and tell those stories too. And then for writing, what I learned was because you're in a village, so you are writing letters to siblings and relatives in Monrovia, not just for your parents, but also for people in the community. So my brother Dave was the one whose job it was because he was writing, okay? And so at the time he left and went to Monrovia to continue school. And so that was the time I felt the weight that I have to write for these people now. And you are talking about like third grade, fourth grade. It's not you are not in a big class, right? And so that love for writing, the love for literature, the love for reading developed very early. Maybe because of where I was born and the task I was supposed to be performing at a very early age. Dr. Patricia Jabba Wesley also was my instructor in high school teaching English. And so that's how literature, love it. I have co-authored one book with my brother. That's the Notebook of a Warrior. That's an
Oh,
account of the someone, a fictional account of someone who fought in the Liberian Civil War, and this person was dying in exile in a place called Zirikule in Guinea, where we were refugees. We also combined and wrote a collection of folklores. And so, with no formal schooling in literature, my degree is not in literature or anything of that sort, but that desire has always been there. And so, it's very exciting, and I love to be part of this show.
definitely. And your story, your book will be in phase 4 of our discussion.
Definitely. So let's
Yes.
start by saying, what is literature? For those joining us, this is the literary hour. We're going to be doing this, for 1 hour today. So we say, what is literature? Here is my understanding that literature, because so many things uh, come together to make up this big word called literature. Any form of writing. Sometimes somebody writing, oh, what are you reading? Literature. So it is this group of work or this body of work, and it could come in different forms. It could be a short story, it could be a prose, it could be a poem, it could be anything else. And that's my understanding of what literature is. And it really tells the story of a group of people.
Yes. That's one of the characteristics that it's a body of written work. Or, I mean, when we're talking about phase 1, of course, it's orature, but it can be also a body of written work, right? And literary or literature, as you say, is a body of written work about a country, a topic, a specific thing, but it's not a manual, it's not literature. A brochure, it's not literature. Although it's written, it's not literature. There are definable characteristics that makes it move into that canon of what we call literature. Yes,
And I like that word when you say it's a canon.
yes, a body of written work.
Yeah. So let's move to the importance of literature. Why is this so important? And I want to say that a lot of things will define who we are as a people, and one of those things is literature. Most of the time we look at history, or we look at other things, but literature is very key in the development, and how it influenced the people. So let's begin to talk about the importance of literature.
Yeah. So I say that if you look at a country, right? Like right now, I know people are asking, why is literature important, right? Why is it important even to Liberia,
Yeah.
right? And I always say that if the infrastructure, if the health system, if the road network, if everything, right? If it's the skeletal, literature is the blood. is the oil that moves it. Why do I say that? Because literature embodies the values, right? The cultural norms of a people. It tells you who you are, right? I will, since this is it's a literary hour, it's more about stories. So let me give you two stories,
Sure.
right? The first one is when I got the Fulbright and was about to leave to come to the United States, I went to the travel agent and trying to make some conversation while she was getting me the ticket. She said, "What are you going to study at Cornell?" And I said, "Oh, literature, African literature." And she said, "You're going to America to study African literature?" And she started to laugh, right? Now, that was a minor thing. But the second one, I had gone to the Liberian Studies Association conference in North Carolina, and I was sitting listening to a professor from Ghana. And this professor was talking about how when Liberia was getting its independence, how, before Liberia got its independence, the United States, they encouraged Liberia to get its independence. And, Dennis, I looked around while I was in that auditorium and I saw people, Liberians, shaking their heads in agreement with him. And I literally ran to the microphone and I said to him, "No, they did not." I said, when Liberia declared its independence, like America was not the first to recognize Liberia.
Yeah.
It was Britain and France. It took America, it took the United States 15 years. And that was because of segregation. But what that taught me was that the war, it doesn't just displace people, it displaces history and memory as well.
Yeah.
So as writers, it is our duty to hold out this truth. I keep talking about the common good and the truth. What is the truth? Because truth can take various forms. Literature, right? The literature of a people will tell you your truth as a people. And once you know that truth, you can say, "I know where I'm coming from, I know where I'm going, and I know how to get there." Because why? Our history, our cultural values, as reflected in the literature, shows us the way. So literature is very important. Jacques Derrida says there is no political power without control of the archive of memory, right? And Chinua Achebe says it. He says, if you do not know where the rain started to beat you, you will not know where to dry your skin. It is the duty of the writer to tell us where the rain started to beat us. So I think that literature holds a very important place in society. Yeah.
Right. And talking about that, you mentioned the name Chinua Achebe. Most Liberians are familiar with Things Fall Apart. That so when we say literature is important because it tells the story of the people, how, and we'll come to African writers, but I just want us to use Chinua Achebe Things Fall Apart as an example to show how literature is important.
Yes. So, Achebe says there's no art for art's sake, right?
Yeah.
The art, like literature is art, right? So he says that it is there to inform, right? It is there to bring us back from what he thinks we've lost or what I know we've lost, right? So if you look at Things Fall Apart, you see a society that was functional and was functioning and had their own rules and regulation and cultural norms until the Europeans came, and then you see this rupture,
Yeah.
right? It's always a rupture. I know we'll come to the characteristics of an African novel, but one of the main characteristics is communal, right?
Yeah.
Whereas you see other people where they become very individualistic. In the African society, the community is paramount. So everything must work for the community. So that's Achebe's hallmark. You do not leave the community, and if you leave the community and you break the norms, you are going to be punished.
Good. Hallmark. And so as we begin this discussion on literature, and we're going to come to Liberian literature, But let's begin to situate that. So let's discuss that within the context of the African literature. You know, what are some of the hallmarks of the African literature and what is the role of the writer?
Yeah, so it's so in African literature, there are many characteristics, like we just discussed one, even in Petals of Blood, right? Ngugi Wati Yongo, We Night Child, right? The communal, the land, right? The connection to the land. So people go to war because of land, right? People, identity is in the land. So that's a hallmark. That's a hallmark of African literature. Another one is myth and legends, right? You see Soyinka. Soyinka is always using myths and legends. Achebe is always using myths and legends. Even Ngugi wa Thiong'o in Petals of Blood, he uses myths and legends of the Kikuyu people. Another one is the African concept of death, right? Death is never linear. It's cyclical, right? You die, but that's not the end. You still walk among the living, right? You have a child, you take it to the ancestors. You name the child after the ancestors. So that's another hallmark of African literature. And like I said, Chinua Achebe said there's no art for art's sake. For Achebe, for Ngugi, for Ayekwe Ama, for Kamara Lai, it's all about education. The writer is not exclusive in himself. He is there for a purpose. And the purpose is to what? To show the community what they've lost, to regain the identity, or to educate them in some in some way. So the hallmarks. I mean, when Achebe and the others started to write, right? You're familiar with this literary term, Bildungsroman, right?
Yeah.
Bildungsroman is about the evolution of a character. So if you're watching, if you watch like Tom Sawyer, right, or Huckleberry Finn, they start off in a certain way. They go through these different events, and at the end, they become another person. When I say another person, they could become a more mature person. They could become a changed person. They could become a dead person, but there's an evolution, right, that brings them to full maturation as an individual. In the African novel, right, the African novel is community. We are one, right? And we will sacrifice you to maintain that community, right? Like in Things for a Part, we saw that. So what's going to happen is that you can go through all your evolutionary phases, right? But if you leave the group, if you leave the community, right? We always see that in the urban-rural divide. If you leave the community, something evil will befall you. You must come back. So the Bildungsroman, the African writer has turned it around and said, look, let's define it as we see it. And what we see is the characteristics of the African society must be reflected in its literature. And one of these characteristics is community. So that's some of the hallmarks: the love of land, the tie into the land, and death as a cycle, and the individual as part of a group.
Great. Yeah. And it's important you drew that contrast with Western literature. Tom Sawyer and his band, the cast of Amontillado and all. So what you say is it is the reverse, wherein in Western literature you see that transformation, that evolution of the character. In African literature, it's all about community. If you leave that community, you either die or you're going to suffer until you come back.
Yes.
As it should be. Right. But how, let's take that a step further to, let me just make that little leap about African American literature. Because if you look at the Beloved, a story like that, do they more or less kind of pick from the African literature, or they're all together different and they're Western?
African American literature, most of it, they have their roots in African literature. And when I say that, if it's not African literature, it's African tradition, right? So if you see Beloved or The Color Purple, right? The Bluest Eye, so you see that whenever or my or what is Zora Neale Hurston, their eyes were watching God, right?
Right.
You come back to the community. If you branch out to go and find yourself, you come back, right? You come back because this is where you belong. So that tradition of return or re-identification, coming back, right? There's nobody. You're some. You're not a sum by yourself. You're some of a
Yeah.
whole. So that community is reflected in the African American literature. I do not know if they've taken it from the African writer, but I do know it comes from African tradition because,
Yeah.
of course, they are part of of Africa. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when you were talking about that, I could sense. So I'm trying to reflect on. Okay, let's look at African American literature. I could see that little connection. That's why I thought to bring it up.
Yeah,
So
because you see, in even in society, you try to situate yourself, right? So when somebody say, "Who are you?" You are more than Dennis Ja. You know, you if you meet somebody, you say, "Oh, my mother name is, my father name is." So
yeah,
it's almost like, who are you in a scheme of this community? Where do
right.
you fit? Where do you situate yourself? You know, so literature is very important. I think it's extremely important. Yeah.
Hmm. And that is bringing us gradually to Liberian literature, so that if we see, if we have a national literature or historical literary tradition. But before that, let me welcome all our viewers. If you are just joining us, this is Focus on Liberia Literary Hour with Jackie and Dennis. This is the first in a new program that we are starting on Focus on Liberia, the Literary Hour. And as I said before, we're going to be focusing on the development of the Liberian literary tradition and discuss some Liberian writers. So, Jackie, does Liberia have a national literature? I know we mentioned Kamara Lai, we mentioned Ngugi wa Thiong'o, Chinua Achebe, and the rest of the African writers. Let's come to Liberia. Do we have a national literature? Is there a historical literary tradition?
You know, Dennis, I would think so. I'm sorry, my cat is crying.
Yeah, it's part of the beauty of the live TV.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, you know, first, when we talk about literature and history, you and I were discussing, does Liberia have a national literature? You know, so we said that so we put it in phases, right? We have different
Yeah,
phases of it. So we say that what what is it in the history that is reflected in the literature of the time, right? What is
yeah,
the interrelationship of the two, the literature and the history? So I would say that first you have to identify events, right, that
yeah,
happen, right? And then you have to say, well, what was left out, right? So if you look at the literature and something happened, what was left out? And then you say, where do I begin, right? Is there counter literature, right? So, yeah, I think so. I think when I think about Liberian literature, I think about Baiti Moore. I think about Professor Patricia Jabe Wesley, Wilton Sangawulu, and things like that. So, for the purpose of discussion tonight, I have a little definition that I had put down in my paper and I want to read.
sure.
It says that, okay, my definition of Liberian literature is so it's defined as one, where literature of a country, right, is defined as one that takes the entire nation for its province and has a realized or potential audience throughout its history. But I will go further and say that the author must be a Liberian, not just the subject matter, and may reside within or outside Liberia. So as we're discussing, if somebody comes and say, oh, you didn't mention this book, find the author. You know, as I said, the author must be Liberian, whether living within or outside the boundaries of the Liberian territory. That's how I define that we're going to discuss now. So yeah, I think that as we go along, I will say if the audience goes along with us, right? At the end, right, we always have these objectives right?
Yeah.
And deliverables. So at the end, let's see if the audience will answer that question. If we really do have a national
Yeah.
literature, they will be able to, our job is to spark their interest, right? And then they will take it from there and find out for themselves. Yeah.
And I want us to make this to draw this distinction from the beginning as we talk about literature and what we're going to be talking about. Uh, we're not going to be discussing like arts, because as we talk about literature, let's say that's what sell the country. If you look at what we know about Jamaica, a lot of what we know about Jamaica came from the songs of Bob Marley, right? So arts and craft, music and all that, that's a separate thing. For the purpose of the show, we're going to be discussing literature has that group of work that like the way Jackie defined it, has that canon of written work, and it could be oral as well. So we're not going to be touching on arts. We're not going to be touching on those other things. I thought we should make that distinction before we even move further, Jackie.
Yeah, literature is art, but it's only one art form, right? So even like the musicians, if you're listening to a song, a song is almost like a poem. It has rhythm, right? It has arranging of words, right? It has patterns. It has rhythm. So it's almost like a poem, right?
Right.
So literature is just another form of art, and it communicates to its audience. So, but we are not going to talk about music. We're going to talk about written form and orature. Yeah, yeah. Thanks for making that distinction. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, as you said, at the as we move through and move our audience through, audience, please listen to us and follow us and see at the end if you can tell us if, like, based on what we're going to be discussing, if Liberia does have a national literature, and what is that historical literary tradition. But Jackie, let's move through the historical development uh, and the influence. How did Liberia's historical development influence its literature? And I just want to mention yesterday in our oral history show, we're discussing Liberia, and we're discussing from 1971 to 1980. That's the period under President Turbot. And as I was asking the questions and our guest was responding, it kind of reminded me that because within every period, there are certain things happening. The songs the people are singing are different. They try to convey a certain message. Writers at that time are trying to convey a certain message. Even the art, people that are doing some paintings and the rest of it. So let's go through Liberia's historical development and how that influenced its literature.
Okay. So the first phase is what we call the phase of Professor Moses Nangbe termed the phase of the pastoral and the folklore, right? This is orature, right? So when the in the mid 15th and 16th century, when the Mali and the Songhay Empire disintegrated, right?
Right.
They migrated towards the coast, right? And so when they were coming, they had those griots, right? The griots are people who are tasked. They are like musicians for poets, right? They are tasked with remembering history through songs.
Yeah.
They are tasked with remembering the deaths and the births, right? We call them griots, and I think they call them jalils. But those people came along. They brought with them to the coast. They
And
brought
Jackie,
with them.
I met some of those people in my village where
Yes,
when they start to praise me or talk about me, they go back so many generations of where I come,
yes,
and I wonder how
yes.
they know.
Yes, yes, those are the griots, right? They are artists within themselves,
Yeah.
and in fact, we do have them, right? Because I remember when my great grandmother died, you have someone who will come and they will sing in the language. They will say,
Yeah.
"Oh, Mary, are you the one lying here? Mary, daughter of." They go back, they go back,
Right.
they go back. So those people came. They migrated to the coast. So they brought with them, so this is the first phase of Liberian literary tradition. But this phase was not written, and this phase was one of, like I said, of folklore, music, proverbs. They brought these things with them. They didn't just bring their children and things. They brought all of these, and this tradition, continues, because some of these things were put into written form, right? S. Jangaba Johnson wrote about the traditional history and folklore of the Bai, of the Grebo, of the Gola, right? And then Fatima Masekwe Fambula, furthermore, she published a short story on the origin of the stone alligator. So,
Yeah.
but these were after, they were not written during this phase, because this phase was pre-1800s, So this first phase is what we call the phase of the pastoral and the folklore. So Dennis, who was singing the praise in your town?
Right. There are people, and even has there are people who do that singing, but even as the time goes by, or even the young people, as young as younger than I am, they'll pick it up,
Yeah.
and they will start singing. So, and the way names are given to people is like from your ancestry, right? When one name is passed down, like my daughter is named after my aunt, or Mom Betty, who passed. So anytime that name is called Doyen. So when that name is called, that name belongs to certain group, and it moves from one generation to the other. So
Yes.
these people, when they start to sing, they know the origin of that name, and they will start to. So a lot of people do that, but there are certain people that are just good at it. And unless that person has died, you rarely see anybody taking their place, because that would be some form of disrespect. Unless they give you the authorization to do what they are doing, you can't do it. But I saw some of those people doing that.
I was listening to your speaker yesterday, and he was singing. I mean, he was talking about a song that they would sing about Wani Boto.
Yeah.
Remember? If you look at it, you may say, "Oh, did this guy live?" And people were like, "Yeah, he lived." But the song of singing about him, he got the ball, he passed it to this person. I
Yeah.
remember that song when I was very young, and that song is orature. They are praise singing Wani Boto and his prowess with the ball, So praise singing as orature is a part, it's a characteristic of our literary tradition. I mean, it's of our oral tradition as well, And look at it this way. I mean, we're not talking about music, but every now and then, people make songs about leaders
Yeah.
in Liberia. That's orature, that's praise singing, that's part of the tradition as well.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're not even singing, but when they call your name, they will recite, your generation, maybe 4 or 5, all the way, just to call your name, just to
Yeah.
praise you. And normally when people are singing, or someone go and you give a little token, of money, and
Yes.
because you did that, they're going to praise you. And when praising you, they start to recite those names going back 4 or 5 generations, and
Yes.
that
And
can
they
be
have good
pretty
memory
interesting.
too. They remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, they remember. Yeah.
So that's the first phase. Do we have other phases?
Okay. The second phase is one that is called a period of discovery.
Mm.
But I call it the historical period, historical colonialism is what I call it. And let me explain why, right? So the
Yeah.
free people began arriving in Liberia around 1822, right? More
Right.
and more of them started to come. This is almost like you're looking at literature. This is a written period now, but you're looking at Liberian literature through journals, letters, diaries that they're speaking
Yeah.
and they're writing. And it is amazing, Dennis, what you can learn from these
Yeah.
diaries. I wrote some out, so forgive me if I keep going back and forth, because some of them, when you read them, you see the society, you see what is happening. You can almost form, I mean, you can almost form a complete picture of what
Yeah.
is happening at the time. So you have the free people coming from the United States, and then you have what? People coming from Barbados, right?
Right.
And remember, the people from Barbados, they were more educated, right? Now you had the free people, and those people, some of them were educated. And then you had the emancipated slaves and people who were told the only way you can leave, I mean, you can be free is we will have to get away from the United States. So you have different levels of people coming to Liberia. It is amazing. The people from Barbados were educated. The free slaves who were free on condition that they come to Liberia were not, right? So you start to read, and then you start to learn about this Christianizing mission that they're talking about. So if I'm allowed to read some of these, I call it Liberian literature through the journals. So one of the letters that went, right, this lady is writing to her sister, and I quote, he said, our mission is evidently to organize the native labor all around us, to introduce regulation and control among them, to gather their children into schools in order to train their intellect, to make these people civilized and Christian people, to incorporate them into our republic as citizens and into the church of God as brethren. And this was in 1865, right? So people went back, letters went back and forth detailing the conditions, and class distinction can be seen, right? In the Liberian Bulletin, you see them talking about birth and death. And listen to this. This is the Liberian Bulletin, right? It says, and I quote, Mistress Martha Ricks of Liberia, who visited Queen Victoria in 1892 and was well received by Her Majesty, addressed to Her Majesty a few months ago a letter of congratulations on the occurrence of the 60th year of her reign, right? So we're saying, okay, we are having all this, and then other people, they're writing and they're saying that the heathen in our families, with our children all around us in our villages, our work here is now and will be for a long time to come defensive. Our work will be to keep up the Christian tone of our immigrants. So they're writing some of these letters. Then as people write and they say, oh, they're writing to their slave to their owners, and they say, thank you for allowing me to come to Liberia. I love this land and I would never leave. Others are saying to their friends and their relatives, oh, don't come here. Alexander Cromwell at the time, who left England to become an educator in Liberia, and he wrote about it right in The Duty of a Rising Christian State, that, look, our job here is to Christianize these people. So you see it in the letters almost like their reason for coming to Liberia. But you also see another group, you see a distinction among them. So from this, you can gather that, okay, the literature that was coming out, it may not have been, a book, but you are able to really know the history through this.
And Jackie, that's where my question comes in. Literature, and we talk about this intersection, literature and history, because anyone looking at these letters, and I give you examples too, that there was the Christian missionary, the Liberian Christian Assembly that went to that part of Sino where I was born. So I think the one letter I saw, there was an election in, I think it was 1955. And the seventh graders that went to watch the elections, they were given a class assignment where and the best letter was selected. And I was able to find that letter online in a local newspaper. I think that was in a California local newspaper, where the young seventh grader detailed what happened in that election, who won, how the people were lined up, and this was hair count elections and all that. Also, when the war took place, I sought refuge. We were refugees in Guinea, along with my brother. And so at a certain time, I think it was around 1995, I went back to Monrovia. And so what we did, we were writing each other what was happening. I wanted to give him a full picture of what was taking place in Monrovia, so that because we were getting ready to leave Guinea for good and come to Monrovia. And then he was also giving, and we will write books. Like we buy a little notebook this size, and we're able to fill it out and write detailed. So what I'm trying to say here is people will look at this thing as history. You
Yes.
said that's literature. What's the difference? What's the intersection?
The intersection is that what is happening in the country at the time is being reflected in the writings that's coming out of the country, right? So what I'm saying is that the intersectionality, you may say, oh, but this is just a historical account. Yes, but we're saying that if we say that the literature reflects the events that are happening at the time, right? We are saying that these letters were not considered literature at the time.
Right.
But what we're saying is that it's a canon, right? It's a group of letters, it's journals, it's things that are coming out. And from these things, we are able to fashion the tradition that's going on at that time. So it is literature of that particular time that we call it the canon of literature that is coming out now. Yeah.
Jackie,
So
I really love this. And I want our viewers, if you are watching, this is the Literary Hour with Jackie and Dennis on Focus on Liberia. We're going to be having this every other Friday at 7 p.m. Today we are debuting the show and we want you to come along. At the end, we want you to decide if Liberia really or have a national literature, and you're going to make that determination. We discuss, we talk about the phase one that was through folklore and oral tradition. Now phase two, which Jackie called that period of colonialism. Some call it a period of discovery. I don't know why Jackie wants to change the name, and she was going to explain that.
yeah, well, let's read some more of these letters, right? Because these letters were compiled into a book called by Bell Wiley called "Slaves No More: Letters from Liberia," right, 1833 to 1869, right? So, and then there's another one called "Dear Master," right? Letters of a Slave Family, right? So, and then you know that the Liberty brought us here by Susan Lindsay that just came out. It chronicled the Major family, right? In Liberia, we have the Major family, and it traced them from the United States all the way here and back. You know, so it's actually a fascinating book if you have time.
And they have the Miller family. They're from Sino.
Okay, but so Susan traces the lineage. I mean the migration, you know, from immigration from there. So okay, so now we're looking at during this time also we have Alexander Cromwell who felt like Liberians they spend too much time on clothes. I call it also literature of the elite because at that time you will see that the women of Liberia, they had a ladies literary institute where they would meet and discuss, you know, the little writings that they were doing. So and at this time also you could see that it was around this time, right, that Liberia is coming into its own now, becoming independent, and we see letters from Blyden encouraging the ladies, right, to go to that. Oh, you can have this group. He was encouraging them to write in this ladies group, and then we see the growth of the country through these letters. And I'll quote: "We did on the 29th of July last by our own representative solemnly declare ourselves a free, sovereign, and independent people, thereby dissolving all political connections between the colonization society and ourselves. And we have established a new form of government, a republican form of government. And it is my pride and joy that I'm a free man in a free country and can enjoy the free, mild, and equal government which has just been established and where I can have an equal share of republicanism." So that's you know, and then of course Edwin Bartley wrote that poem about human greatness. So it was really a time of, I call it the golden age. It was a time of recreating, right, the country that they have left. But you know, it's funny because if you still read some of the letters, one of them is a man who's complaining, right? He's writing and he says, "Far from rejecting the institution, values, dress, and speech of a society that has rejected them, the free slaves attempted to reproduce their culture on an alien shore. The bonds of culture were stronger than the bonds of race, and the settlers clung to the differences that set them apart from the people within their midst, right? And of course, we have letters from General Lee saying, during my stay of 2 months in Monrovia, I was very much pleased, except that the people were too gay. They were too fashionable for me. You know, and I mean, from there you can see, you can look at the society and tell that, okay, these are the things that are happening, you know.
So Liberians been a
actually,
fun-loving group of people for a long time.
look, Dennis, the ladies of Caldwell, right? They held tea parties, and President E.J. Roy had select gathering parties, and they had this lady, Angela Worsworth, who spoke French, and she played the guitar, and Lucas taught piano lessons. You know, I mean, but here's one significant thing that I found out through going through these letters, that from the letters and diaries, we knew that the first flag, right? The first Liberian flag was made of silk, right? It was made of silk. And the center of the blue field in the upper left corner was a 5-point white star. But did you know that on one side of the blue were the words, the love of liberty brought us here, and on the other side were the words, Republic of Liberia? We didn't know that.
No.
We didn't know that it was on the flag, but we learned that through letters. That they're saying, look, you know, this is what was on the flag.
So and I see, Jackie, you know, not trying to drift, you always talk about primary sources. I think that's one of them.
Yes. These are primary sources, you know. I mean, I'm just amazed at what I've learned from the letters, you know. I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. Yeah.
Right. So, because somebody can grab that letter and make a book. But if you see the letter, if you read the letter yourself, it gives you more information of what was happening at that time, and it's a little more authentic.
Yeah. So maybe we should pause and see, you know, if you want us to answer some questions.
First. Yeah. Let me give some comments now. Ask our people at the back room to connect the phone line so we can get some questions. We can get some questions and comments, but not much comments here yet. Jason Cassie, hello Jackie. There's a shout out here for you. DC Wilson says, smart lady indeed. Since I'm not a lady, that should be you as well. Jiple Jebo, that's say thanks guys for the show.
Hi G.
He's also says very informative. James Molly say, I'm following you live in Zwedru. Thanks. Focus on Liberia. Sam Wallow, none of those individuals, he's talking about indigenous people, asked to be made so-called civilized by the immigrants. Then they labeled the indigenous peoples heathens, relegated them to second-class status, and later excluded them from the economic and political system, thus indentured servitude. Sam, are you reading that from the Liberian literature? So those are the few comments we have now. Pretty soon we're going to open our phone lines, and the number will be posted at 605-313-6004. Their code is 791-403. Jackie, your response to the comments.
Yeah, I want to answer Sam Wallow's comment. Yeah, you know, from one of the like you always talk about source, Dennis, and one of the sources that I would encourage people to go to is the annual report of the American Colonization Society. If you read the annual report, it's quite an eye-opener, because you would see that the American Colonization Society was never intending to Christianize anybody. What happened was that they did not want the free slaves to remain, right? They wanted them out of the United States. Their fear was that they would revolt. And primary sources, if you look at again at the it's a question, so I didn't have the information right here, but there is a petition that was sent to the United States Congress by the African American who live in Virginia,
Yeah.
and asking the United States government to please give them some land, right, in Mississippi, very far away, so that they could live, because they were afraid to leave America because they didn't know anywhere else. And of course,
Yeah.
the Congress refused. But the nephew of George Washington, Bushel Washington, the guy who made the dictionary, Daniel Webster, the Webster Dictionary, and other people got together, and they asked, they sought help from the pastors, right? They said, how can we make these people willing to go? Yeah. So, you know, that song that we used to sing as a child, God does not compel you to go against your will, but he just make you willing to go. So what happened was that the American colonization said, if we put it in Christian terms, if we say to them, you guys are going to Christianize the savages, as they call them, right? They will be more willing to go. And you see that again and again, Dennis, in the letters, that the people actually believe that. In the letters, they are saying, oh, we are here, you know, we are doing God's work. We are going to Christianize them. We're going to make them, and we're going to Christianize these heathens. I mean, some of the letters are terrible, Dennis. You know, so of course it was not the indigenous people's fault. They met them there. But what I'm saying is that I am simply reading letters that they wrote. These are not my words. So when I mean, actually, one of them, I even changed the word because this person had savages, and I changed it to men. You know, so the letters are very, but you can see the split already.
Right.
But this is history. You can see the split.
Right.
There are those who say, thank you very much for allowing us to come to this country. And then there are those who are saying, I want to go back. And there are those who are saying, I will go back after my work is done, which is what? To Christianize the savages. And those are the phrases that they use. Yeah.
If you want to call now, the phone line is open. The number is posted on the wall. So Jackie, let's quickly go through if we have time to go through more faces.
Okay, so I will go to the third phase, right, which is the one I call unification and integration, right? So in the 1900s, right, the last of the Liberian president of the 1800s had died, William D. Coleman, right, and then William D. Coleman resigned, right? So his administration interior policy was to annex the hinterland with the settler colonies. And between 1900 and 1950, right, Dennis, the question of integration emerged as the most serious concern of the day, right? How do we create one country, right? So if we look at the writings of Edward Wilmot Blyden, Henry Cole, Benjamin J.K. Anderson, Abayomi Kanga, that's what they're doing. The writings that's coming up now is supporting the government's vision of an integrated Liberia, right? So you see, the literature of a country can be used to further the government's vision. You know, if I can say that. So you know, poetry also began to flourish during this time. One of the things is that, you know, in Abayomi Kanga's book, right, about what's her name? Matela Newport, who fired a cannon, right? She called that event the triumph of civilization over barbarism, of enlightenment over gross ignorance, and of Christianity over paganism. You know, so this is not this is what's happening. You are talking about integration, integrating the country to become one, and yet you're saying to the indigenous people, you are going to be integrated into our group, right? But we don't have time because you guys are pagans anyway. So poetry began to flourish at that time too. So Edwin Barclay released a collection of poems, right, entitled Leaves from Love's Garden. And then one thing that we have to mention in the last phase that we didn't was that a lot of people, and even on this platform, they talked about the fact that Liberia, we have things fall apart, and we have all of these other things, but we don't have any literature of our own. Well, that's not true, right?
Yeah.
In the late 1800s, we have a book, Guayna Pao, right? And this book is the first African novel, 1895,
Oh,
right?
wow.
The story of an African princess, right? It's by Joseph Walker, and it's about a Vi princess, right? I call it a feminist novel, right? Who wants who is running from a prearranged marriage, right? So even during this time, we have an indigenous young man writing a novel, right? And so we must not forget that when we start to say things like, "Oh, Liberia doesn't have a novel," and, we just started writing. No, we didn't. We started writing a long time ago. But in this fourth phase, we had the second Liberian novel, which is Love in Ebony by Charles Cooper in 1932. Thank you, Professor Anangwe, for giving me a copy to read. So if he's watching, right? So we have Famata and Momolu, right, in the land of Zinta. So we have integration, yes, but we also had a novel coming out, whereas you had this group of people talking about what? The civilized way of life. You have a novel coming out saying, no, 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 the indigenous has value as well. Because who came up now? Who came up during this time? By Timor.
Yeah.
Right? So if you want to see the person who will embody Liberian literary tradition, the first indigenous poet, right? By Timor. And by Timor says, I don't care what's happening now. I don't care about the national vision of integration, right? You want us to integrate on your terms, right? But I am going to do what? I am going to be unapologetic. And what will I do? I will glorify all things traditional. And this is what he did, along with Fatima Masikwa Family, who did her autobiography From Bush to Boulevard, right? So you have these two competing visions coming up. You have people who are saying, look, we are going to tell you that you guys are barbarians. And they said, and the indigenous people are going to say, we're going to show you the beauty. And I just want to read what William V.S. Tubman said in his second inaugural address, because this set the stage for the writings that were coming up. And I quote, in 1952, he said, to effect integration, we shall engage in and strive at the assimilation and unification of our various populations composing the ballot politics. Liberia must be a place for all Liberians to live in alike, all to stand equally privileged. All classes of our people must be made to fuse and coalesce into a solid whole. This, we think, may be effected by a faithful and an ardent adherence to the fundamental individual values guaranteed by our Constitution. We deem it to be of the highest national importance and most appropriate at this time to call for national unity and sovereignty. We have consistently and insistently pursued the policy of unification so that the whole body of the people of this nation may be integrated and fused together in the common patriotic endeavor of preserving, developing, and defending the sacred heritage. It has been proved, and now here's the crux. It has been proved in our lifetime that the civilized, you hear the word, that the civilized population cannot get along without the uncivilized. Neither can the uncivilized population get along without the civilized, and that neither element can exterminate the other. We must now destroy all ideologies that tend to divide us. Americo-Liberianism must be forgotten, and all of us must register a new era of justice, equality, fair dealing, and equal opportunities for everyone from every part of the country, regardless of tribe, clan, section, element, creed, or economic status. If any person, civilized or uncivilized, oppose the unification of this nation, he is an enemy of the state. End of quote.
Enemy of the state is a familiar phrase.
So you see, so now this is where you are using literature for nation building, right?
Yeah.
Our vision is unification and integration, but you're telling us that, okay, these are two groups of people, you should come together, but you have one group writing about the other that they are barbarians, and then you have the other group writing and saying, let me show you the beauty of the indigenous. So we have Charles Cooper, we have Baiti Moore, we have Fatima Masekwe Fambula saying, no, you can't do that. This is what we know. This is our truth. So this is the face, the face of integration that, so they say in order for this unification process to succeed, literature that dealt with the division of the two classes was frowned upon. Yeah. Writers had to avoid the praise of traditional values, which were regarded as heathen, to be assured of non-intervention by government and access to the public market. Creative writing in Liberia became molded by government views. Some writers continue to write, like Baiti Moore, right? And then we have Roland Dempster in 1953, right? Roland Dempster came out with this satire called what? What, Dennis? What was it called? The Mystic Reformation of Gondola. Yeah. And Roland Dempster was very smart. He knew that if he wrote about the corrupt practices that was going on in the government, he would be fined or worse, in prison. So what he did was to write a satire of a town called Gondola, right? The Mystic Reformation of Gondola is a satire about Liberia, but he set it into this place called Gondola that was so corrupt, and then throughout the book, there's a change. So Roland Dempster also, and then he had poems. Of course, he praised Tubman, which was very strange that he was writing a book, about the corruption, but then he wrote a poem about Tubman. You had Jangaba Johnson writing about the folk tales about the Gola. You have Roland Dempster writing about Monrovia Old and New, a song out of midnight. It was really a time of the heyday. People were writing at the time, so that phase, we call it a phase of unification and integration. And I use those terms lightly.
And let's look at murder in the cassava patch.
Yes.
And show me, how that but first of all, let me get a caller here. He's trying to call our line, but he's not getting through. So he's calling my line here. Caller, are you there? Okay. All right. Let me take a call. Go ahead, caller, your name and where you calling from.
This is Chabo Jipley. I'm calling from Canada, brother.
Mr. Jipley, welcome to Focus on Liberia. Your comments. Jackie is smiling.
Yeah, I'm impressed that you guys are in studio and trying to give the Liberian people literature that is relevant to our times and in our past. So I'm very, very, very happy that you guys came up with this program, and we will be tuning in every week to listen to what you have to say to us, and also to learn, basically. So I just wanted to commend you guys. And Jackie went through the very phases of Liberian literature, and the discovery period is very, 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 very much interesting. So our literature, basically, we have no history, like she said.
Yeah.
You know, our history is intertwined with our literature. If you follow American literature, or Japanese or Chinese literature, the various periods in their histories is reflected within the literature. So, take for example, William Faulkner short story, A Rose for Emily. He wrote that short story just as the American Civil War came to an end. So, A Rose for Emily, which is one of my favorite short story, is reflected within the majestic mansions of the surging, part of the country. Even Hemingway's most of his writings came from the war. That in which he was a participant in. So I think the fact that you guys came up with this program to educate our people, educate us on our literature and our our history is very relevant. And I just wanted to commend you guys.
And thank you so much, Chebo, for calling in. As we go on, we're going to be rallying the troops. So watch out. We'll be reaching out to you.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yes.
I'm open anytime to. I'm not only just I'm also a participant. We are striving to make Liberian literature relevant.
Yeah, I know that very well.
Yeah, so I'm not just trying to call in. I want to make sure I'm interested in seeing this show succeed.
Yeah.
Because the Liberia is consumed with politics. Every day Liberia is about politics. You post anything about politics, everybody comment, and nobody cares about literature. Nobody cares about the endowments. So these kind of programs will help to rejuvenate the zeal of our people and writers. And I think this is in the right direction. I just wanted to commend you guys.
Thank you so much.
And congratulations, Che, on the publications of some of your poems. I really, he's one of our prize assets, Liberian wizard of words. So it's nice to hear from you.
Great, thank you. And so, Jackie, this is Literary Hour, so our time is up. But we saw that we still have some phases that we didn't get to. And I really wanted to get to the protest phase.
Yeah, that for the next one we can do that.
Yeah, but that will be for the next one. Let's conclude here. Let's conclude here, and that national. What I was asking was how we could see that integration and unification reflected in Baltimore, the one most Liberians familiar with, murder in the cassava patch.
Yeah, that Dennis, when we're speaking earlier, we talked about the characteristics of African literature.
Yeah.
And we said that, every time there's a conflict between the urban and the rural, right?
Right.
When the main character leaves and goes into the city, whether it's man of the people or whatever, tragedy happens. The murder in the cassava patch was also a warning, right? Imagine this. You have a government that's talking about unification and integration, right? And you have one side of the writers saying, the urban writers are saying, those people are barbaric. Our side is probably the best. And then you have a writer like Baltimore coming up with just this novelette, right? A very small book to show what he's showing is the insidiousness and the evil ways of urban life, right?
Yeah.
Because remember, they want. I should know her name.
Gotokai? Gotokai, the guy?
No, not Gotokai. The girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know if everybody have read the book, right? Because I don't want to tell what happened to her. But what happened? She wants things. So what happened is the urban comes into the rural, right?
Yeah.
The way of life, right? Oh, this is traditional ways. It's no longer good. And Baltimore says, look what happens when you forsake the community. Look what happens when you leave the comfort of your cultural mores and norms. Evil befalls you, right? It's a warning. You know, I mean, we read that book in Liberia. We were like laughing because we were young at the time. But if you look at that book, for that book to be published at that time, in when you are saying come together as one people, and Baiti Moore is saying this coming together comes with consequences, and the consequences might be death if you drink so freely of this new culture, which is the urban culture. The gimme, 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 gimme. I want. Something's going to happen to you, you know. And even in his other book of poetry, Voices from Grassroots, right? He talks about that as well. So I think that you're right. If you look at that phase, the two books that come out of it, Baiti Mo, Murder in Cassava Patch is well known, and Dempster and the Mystic Reformation of Gondolai, because each one of them, they're dealing with the problems in a society at the time. You know, you can take Mystic Reformation of Gondolai today and read it, and you know exactly about Liberia. And then you ask yourself, has anything changed? You know, so the books really reflected what was happening at the time, but the timelessness of the topics, right? Of the subject matter, the timelessness. You know, you could read that book today and say, oh, a young girl leaves Patala and comes into Monrovia, and this is what's going to happen if she's not careful, right? So I think the timelessness is one of the hallmarks of those two books. Yeah.
Good. And that girl name is Tene.
Tene, yes, sorry, Tene.
All right. So thank you so much. We'll be concluding. This is just the appetizer or the introduction of a brand new show on focus on Liberia, the Literary Hour. And we're going to continue next week. And that's Thanksgiving, so we're going to check and make sure that we have that time, or we're going to be taking a week off. But Jackie, thank you so much. This is just the introduction. We want to thank all our viewers for staying along with us. And we need your feedback. And if you are interested in being a part of the show, please don't hesitate to reach out to me or Jackie, and we're going to take it from there. Jackie, your final thoughts, and then we can close the broadcast for tonight.
Well, my final thoughts is, if you're a writer, a Liberian writer, keep writing. And, you know, if you've written and you would like to come on the show, as Dennis said, please contact us so we can bring you on. Next time, we'll be talking about the last three phases, right? The protest phase, the phase of exile, and then remembrance, reflection, and return. So I would ask you to join us. And I would say that keep in mind as we go through the discussions, and then at the end, you know, we will all answer the question, does Liberia have a literary tradition? And does Liberia have literature that reflects the times? And what are those books that reflects the time? Yeah, thank you.
And then it's from the control room. Quickly, we did a poll. And the question for the poll was, do you like the topic we are discussing? We had 16 responses. Of the 16, 15 said yes, constituting 94%, and one person saying no, constituting 6%. So by word of majority, the audience that followed the show, I think they like it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. On that note, both to the 16 and also the one person, we say thank you so much for your responses. Thanks to those who are here with us. On behalf of all of us here at Focus on Liberia, my name is Dennis Jack, closing on behalf of the crew. Good night and God bless you. Literature, literature, literature.
Thank you.
We are Liberians.